I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. How do people in Israel respond to international concern and indeed even criticism of Israel's 3-week airstrikes on Gaza and now the second stage ground invasion that began on Saturday? Is public opinion in Israel uniformly with the government, or are there emerging signs of difference, perhaps even of small division, that are becoming apparent? Joining me live for today's discussion from Tel Aviv is Israel's former Justice Minister, Yossi Beilin. Mr. Beilin, let me start by saying that what Hamas did on the 7th of October was barbaric and savage, utterly condemnable, and completely unforgivable. But since then, in the last 3 weeks, Israel has killed over 8,000 and injured 20,000. 40% of the dead are children. You've cut off electricity and water, fuel and food. And on Friday, according to BBC, Israel launched massive airstrikes on North Gaza on a scale never seen before. On Saturday, you started the second stage ground invasion. So my question is simple. Even if punishment and revenge was justified, hasn't this gone on for too long and hasn't it gone too far?
Well, the issue of revenge doesn't interest me. I don't need any revenge. Even one day of revenge is too long. The point is very clear. There is a very specific aim to this campaign, and that is to uh, paralyze the leadership of Hamas and to replace it by other Arab countries or by the Palestinian leadership itself, which is now in Ramallah. That is the point. It is not just to cause them grief and a high death toll. Now, the point is that once you decide to launch a campaign in Gaza itself in order to replace the leadership of Hamas, they are using the civilians as human shields for themselves. I mean, they hide under hospitals and they are using schools, high schools of different kinds in order to hide. Now, when Israel said to the Palestinians, we are going to begin to have a campaign against the Hamas, and we will act in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We understand that leaving your homes is not something very simple, and it is not a usual request. But to save yourselves, please go down. What happens is that in many cases, the Hamas people are forcing those who left their homes to go back to the north part of Gaza, where Israel is operating right now. So what you have is a high, relatively high. We don't know the numbers. I'm not sure that the numbers you refer to are the relevant numbers, but of course there is a death toll. And the situation is really very, very problematic. If you decide that because of what is happening and the Hamas acts against its own citizens to prevent them from leaving the area in which we operate, if because of that you don't operate, I think that it might be a very big mistake, because the
But
message. Yeah, please.
But Mr. Beilin, look at the cost on innocent civilians. Large number of districts, if not half an entire cities, have been reduced to rubble. Hospitals are teeming with tens and 20,000 who are simply seeking shelter. There's no electricity for the ill. There's no electricity for babies' ventilators. There's food shortage, and people in Gaza are now looting and raiding warehouses. Law and order is breaking down. Is it fair to continue without even agreeing to a humanitarian pause? If you genuinely don't want to kill innocents, a humanitarian pause is essential, but your government refuses.
No. The humanitarian corridors are operating, and you have the food and water and remedies, whatever. This is not the main problem in my view. The problem is that people have to leave their homes, and that Hamas doesn't allow them to go to the southern part where Israel doesn't operate. Theoretically, that should have been the case. Israel in advance is saying, because we are an organized country, we are telling them we are going to act. It took several days until we did act, and then we found Hamas preventing them from leaving.
Can I respond to that? Can I respond to that? You say that you advise people to go to the south. You claim that Hamas is not letting them. The truth is that even when people moved to the south, Israel continued to bomb Khan Yunis and Rafah. The Al Jazeera correspondent's family was killed in the Nuseirat refugee camp. And now many people, having moved to the south and find they're still being bombed, are consciously and deliberately going back to their homes. They're saying, if we have to die, let us at least die in our homes. Even the attempt you made to advise people to move south was not honestly lived up to. You continue to bomb them in the south.
Well, I cannot speak for the Israeli government, and I don't know what happened in this specific issue, but generally speaking, people who left to the south are not hurt. I cannot deny that something like that happened, and I don't know how and why, but generally, the people who went to the south do get the humanitarian support there. They cannot be happy, and they will return to the north in the
If they live, they will return, because what's happening in the south isn't a one-off. It's not an occasional recurrence. The truth is, Khan Yunis is being bombed almost every single day, multiple times a day. That's true of Rafah as well. We are seeing, not just on Al Jazeera, but sometimes on BBC, scenes of the devastation that's been created in Khan Yunis. Is this fair to innocent people? You say it's only Hamas leadership you want to attack. You have no ill will against the ordinary Palestinians, but the people suffering are ordinary people, children, women. Is it fair to them?
It is not fair to them, but it is also not fair that Hamas, in its cruel way of dealing with human beings, is using them in order to be shielded. For example, Hamas built a city, an underground city of tunnels. They have their fuel, they have their needs. While people on the surface are dying, they are having their whole life under the ground. And I think that the fact that they are using their brethren in order to shield them cannot prevent us from moving. Because if we don't replace Hamas, the people who live there, not only us, will continue and suffer. Believe me, I have friends in Gaza, and I'm talking to them. I can tell you, the hope that we will succeed is not only an Israeli one.
Let me give you the example of Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza, and this is as of yesterday. You say that
I'm not the army spokesman. I mean, I cannot speak.
No. I'm not asking you to speak as army spokesman.
What are the targets of this campaign, and what do I want to have there at the end of the war? I want to release Israel and the Palestinians themselves from this terrorist organization. And
Mr. Beilin, it's not the army strategy I'm putting to you, it's the moral behind it that I'm questioning you about.
I will not give up on this war because here and there the Hamas succeeded in shielding themselves by human beings and telling them that Israel is the cruel party and not themselves.
Let me finish my question and then you'll see why I'm asking it. Yesterday, every television channel in the world, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, reported that Al Quds Hospital had been told to vacate, to empty, to remove all patients, and to do so for fear of being hit by Israeli airstrikes. And the hospital itself has said, how do we take out babies on incubators? How do we take out elderly people on ventilators? Removing them will be killing them. That is the tragedy that is being caused to innocent people. Does it not, as a former justice minister, upset you that this is happening to innocent people?
It is a tragedy. But what is, the cynical way of Hamas is that they are using the hospitals. Under all these hospitals, or most of them, you have headquarters of Hamas because they know that Israel doesn't want to bombard hospitals. So what is happening? You are doing the minimum. You are telling them in advance that you will bombard the place. You are giving them a reasonable period of time, and you know that it is awful, awful. But still you have to decide at a certain moment whether you give up on the campaign because of the cruelty and the cynicism of Hamas, or you continue in your best way not to create a too high death toll.
Let me ask you one more question before I move to another subject. Yesterday, on the BBC, on one of the most widely watched popular shows, Laura Kuenssberg's show, there was a Palestinian voice which said, and I'm quoting, "Today in Gaza, we do not ask where should we go to be safe. We ask where do we go to die."
Well,
How do you respond as a justice minister when you hear innocent people saying that?
It is heartbreaking, but if they go to the south, they can save themselves.
But can they? They don't have cars, they don't have fuel, the roads are blown up, they don't have access to physical transportation.
Yeah, but look what is happening, for example, to fuel. Whenever the fuel is brought to the Gaza Strip, it is taken violently by Hamas and taken to the underground tunnels.
But forgive me, as far as I know, no fuel has been allowed into the Gaza Strip. Israel has strictly forbidden it.
No. I'm speaking about, generally speaking, what is happening is when fuel is brought to the Gaza Strip, they take it to their own needs because they cannot continue and live in the tunnels without a sufficient amount of fuel. And this is why fuel is the most important thing for the Hamas, not necessarily for the people who are leaving their homes.
So, do these things trouble the conscience of people like you in Israel?
It is breaking. I'm telling you, my dear, it is breaking my heart. But what Hamas did, they took hostage both Palestinians and Israelis. And if we get rid of them, like the world got rid of ISIS, there will be a very big sigh of relief, and there is a price for that. And this price is breaking my heart. But if I have to decide and stop the war, and allow Hamas to continue in their crazy activities, or go on with it, even though there is a price for that, I'll choose the latter.
What about the West Bank, Mr. Beilin? According to Al Jazeera, France has criticized what it calls unacceptable attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank by Israeli settlers. Al Jazeera says since the 7th of October, 118 Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed by settlers. How do you explain that?
I don't have to explain it. It is crazy. We know that. We deal with it. It is headlines in Israel, not only in the world. There are people there, Israelis, the settlers, who are exploiting the situation where all the interest is on the in Gaza, and they hope that people will forget about the West Bank and that they can do whatever they want. And I believe that now, at least, I mean, I just now signed on a petition to the defense minister to do whatever possible to end it. It is an issue for us, and at least the peace camp is fighting against it.
Let me come to the second stage ground assault that has begun and the impact of that on hostages. That's an issue that will matter internally, emotionally to Israeli society. Now, this second stage ground invasion is happening exactly when the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has offered to release all hostages in return for all prisoners. As far as I can tell, he's not calling for a ceasefire. He's saying all hostages, and I repeat, all hostages for all prisoners. Not only does the ground invasion rebuff the offer, but you could endanger the lives of the hostages. These are people dearest to you.
Well, this is another dilemma. It is a very big dilemma. And all these things may say at the end of the day, stop the war in Gaza, allow the Hamas to continue. And I'm not sure that this is my message.
But you think it could happen?
I hope that it won't happen. I hope that we will find the hostages. I hope that we will free them. But I cannot be sure about it.
Yesterday, the Qatar Foreign Ministry, and you know, Qatar has been mediating in the release of the 4 hostages who've been released so far, issued a statement which says, and I'm quoting, "This escalation makes it considerably more difficult." Won't those words annoy the hostage families? They're waiting desperately for their loved ones to come back. And here is Qatar saying that the ground invasion is making it more difficult to release them. And won't this also adversely affect the way the Israeli people look on the ground invasion? If the cost of the invasion is the death of your hostages, won't public opinion turn against it?
You know, the current government of Israel is saying that it can achieve the 2 targets: to release the hostages and to replace Hamas. I'm not privy to the details of the campaign in Gaza. Maybe they are right, maybe they are wrong, but I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I hope that they are right, that they can do both things. I don't want to get into the corner in which one has to decide between the hostages and the replacement of Hamas.
The second consequence that stares us in the face of the ground invasion that began on Saturday is the one that President Raisi of Iran spoke about on Sunday. He said, Israel's action has crossed the red lines, which may force everyone to take action. Do you now fear that Hezbollah, maybe even Iran, could intervene, thus in turn provoking America, and thus in turn creating a far wider, more worrying regional conflict? That is probably just 1 or 2 steps away, it would seem.
I hope that it will not happen, but I'm not sure about it.
Can I ask you a broader question? Since 1967, many Israeli historians, Avi Shleim, for example, many highly acknowledged Israeli columnists, Gideon Levy, for example, believe that the West Bank and Gaza have been under occupation by Israel. Now, today, if Israel has a right to defend itself and retaliate against Hamas, and clearly it does, I'm not denying it, but then by the same token, don't Palestinians have a right to resist and fight back against colonial occupation?
I mean, do you think that they want to do it now? They want to risk what they have and to have a war against Israel? I don't think the Palestinian Authority is Hamas. Palestinian Authority is the PLO, and with the PLO we have an agreement, and this agreement is still relevant. And I hope that once the war with Hamas is over, we will be able to return to the negotiating table with another government in Israel and talk business about a permanent agreement on the basis of the 67 borders. If what you say is right. And maybe, I mean, theoretically, one can say, yeah, it is right because there is no peace. What are they going to achieve if they fight against Israel? I mean, the people in the West Bank. There is no chance that in such a situation they will have peace with us. I think that there are enough Israelis who believe in peace with the Palestinians, not with the Hamas, but with the PLO, and that after the war, this should be the time for peace, and rather than using this opportunity when the world looks at us again and is interested in having a peace between Israel and the Palestinians, if they launch a war, as it was with the Second Intifada, that in the midst of the negotiations with the Palestinians, the Palestinians launched a crazy Intifada against Israel, and the whole process was paralyzed.
Connected to the question I asked you, whether Hamas has the right to resist colonial occupation, and it's only loosely connected, but it is connected, is the statement made by the United Nations Secretary General last week. He said 7th October did not happen in a vacuum. Many people say he was speaking the truth. There is a history behind it. And he wasn't taking sides and he wasn't accusing Israel, but he was simply stating, bear in mind that there is a history behind 7th October. Why was that so difficult for your government to accept? People like Gideon Levy accepted, Avi Schleim accepted. Why can't your government accept that there is a history?
It shouldn't accept it. It was a huge mistake of my very good friend, the Secretary General of the UN. He is a wonderful person. And I know him and I know his heart. And I was stunned by the fact that he said these things. And I'll tell you why. When you say that it was not done in a vacuum, actually, you are not justifying it, but you understand it. And when you understand the atrocity against babies, less than a year 1 year old babies, whose organs were dismembered in the eyes of their mothers, you cannot say that it was not in a vacuum, especially when you know, like I know, that Israel left Gaza in 2005. There are no Israeli soldiers and there are no Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip.
But you've blockaded it since 2006. You don't
Why?
allow anything in and you don't allow anything out. You don't allow sea access.
But I'll tell you why. Because after we left Gaza, Hamas continued to launch missiles against Israel. It was not a peaceful situation in which Hamas developed Gaza. They ruined Gaza. They are ruining.
Mr. Beilin, Hamas came to power in January 2006 after winning a free and fair election and surprisingly defeating Fatah. It formed a government, but you didn't recognize it. The United States and the European Union didn't recognize it, and it fell. A year later, in November 2007, when Hamas and Fatah got together to form a unity government, once again, you, and I'm quoting Professor Avi Schleim, connived with the Americans to overthrow that government. And in the end, to preserve itself, Hamas had to topple the system and take over on its own. There is, again, a history that explains the relationship. And what I'm saying is, the United Nations Secretary General wasn't understanding. He was explaining. There's a difference between giving history to understand.
I don't agree with you. As I said, he didn't accepted it. He did not justify it. But to explain something like that, you can explain a war, but you cannot explain dismembering organs of a baby in the eyes of her mother. Impossible. And taking hostages, people of 85. I mean, are you crazy? They are ISIS. You don't understand ISIS. You don't explain ISIS. You cannot say that ISIS was not born in a vacuum. Although theoretically, you can explain the phenomenon of ISIS as something which happened with the culture of the West and whatever. But then, when you say something like that, in a way you justify it. The Hamas is not justifiable. And what Antonio Guterres did is a mistake, a real big mistake, and I'm sorry for him for saying it.
My last issue, when October the 7th happened, the whole of Europe and America responded with horror. Their total sympathies were with Israel. But in the last week, and yesterday in particular, thousands, tens of thousands, in London, 200,000 were out on the streets protesting against what the Israeli government is doing to the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, these are people who represent public opinion in your closest allies. It happened in America in Congress. The Jewish Voice for Peace held up Grand Central Station, and those were Jewish people doing it. Does it not worry you that in these Western countries that matter so much, public opinion is turning against you?
Of course, it bothers me. But it was very clear that after a few days, when Israel acts in retaliation or in a way to remove Hamas from the government in Gaza, the world will look again at the other side and did not allow Israel to act actually. You cannot just have empathy for Israel after the crazy attack on the 7th of October and then say, but you should not do anything. And the world is saying it. Yeah, it was very sad when it saw the pictures of the 7th of October. But when Israel reacted, they say, hey, stop it because civilians are suffering. I can understand it. I do not suggest to stop the incursion to Gaza because of that. And there is a price. Israel knows it, that there is always a price because the world, and I can understand it, is with the underdog.
But this public protest against Israel will get worse if the ground invasion continues, and if more civilians die, more hospitals are bombed, more people die of lack of medicine, the public pressure in the West will grow and grow and grow.
I agree with you that it will, if it continues, it might be worse. The question is whether Israel should stop its activities in Gaza because of that. And what I'm saying is that we should not do that. We should not stop it now. This was one of the reasons why in the past, in the rounds that we had, the conflicts with Hamas, after a few days we ended the campaign without actually winning the case. In this case, we must win. And the victory will not be only ours.
What about the impact on the Arab street? You are located in West Asia, what the Western world calls the Middle East. Your neighbors are all Muslim Arab countries. Even countries like Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, the UAE, and Morocco, with whom you have diplomatic relations, public opinion in those countries has turned massively against you. And yet you have to live in this region. This is where your home will always be. Doesn't it worry you that Israel is becoming hugely unpopular, even with countries that formed diplomatic relations 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that there is such a support. I mean, these countries actually are defining the Hamas as a terrorist organization. Don't ignore it. And, I get reactions directly for friends in the Arab world who are saying, don't dare to stop it. Don't dare. I cannot.
You really mean that? You really mean people in the Arab world are contacting you privately to say, don't stop it?
Because it is ISIS for them. It is exactly like they refer to ISIS. It is Islamists, super violent people who are against the current establishments everywhere in the Arab world. It is not that Hamas is supporting any Arab country, or maybe Qatar. There is an animosity in those countries against Hamas, not in the public opinion. I agree with you that the public opinions are anti-Israeli. And here there is another, most of the people. And here the question is whether Israel should take it into account. And the answer is yes. Should it stop the war before time? The answer is no.
So you're saying to me, this is a fight to the finish. The war will only end when Hamas is obliterated, and if as a result...
No Hamas. No Hamas. I mean, the leaders, the current leaders of Hamas. Hamas as a movement is something that we cannot, eliminate. It is there. But the current leadership, which was responsible for what happened on the 7th of October, and for all the activities in the last years, should be replaced. This is the victory for me. I don't know how much is it achievable. Maybe.
But you're also saying that if 8,000, 9,000, 15,000 civilians get killed, that is a cost that has to be paid.
You said it.
My last question, and I ask it because he's your prime minister at the moment, and people are questioning the tweets he put out yesterday. He first tweeted, and I'm talking about Prime Minister Netanyahu, blaming Shin Bet and other top intelligence officials for not informing him of any potential threats from Hamas. Then, after people began to protest, including Mr. Gantz, he deleted his tweet and apologized. And my question is simple. What does this tell us of Mr. Netanyahu's state of mind? And should he continue as prime minister when the pressure on him is going to lead to these sort of mistakes happening repeatedly?
It tells us that a day after the end of the war, he should not be there as a prime minister.
But that could be months away. He's also saying the war could take months.
Yeah, even if he says so, I mean, it will not take there for very long. Look at the other wars of Israel. It is never, none of them, but for the first war for independence took months.
But is he a safe pair of hands, given what he's been saying and then apologizing for?
You will not get from me even one. You will not get from me even one word in favor of Netanyahu.
Not even one word in favor of him. But should he be removed?
He should be removed. I'm not suggesting that in the middle of the war he has to be removed, but he will be removed.
Mr. Beilin, thank you very much for talking to me, and in particular, thank you very much for hearing all my questions. They couldn't have been questions you wanted to hear, but I am grateful that you answered each and every one.
Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.